We want to talk today briefly about the New South Wales government and plans to rectify what many farmers have seen over many years as problems with the existing Native Vegetation Act. Yeah. Can you give us in a thumbnail what farmers generally dislike about the existing Act? And of course, I'd love to ask you about the environmental lobby and their fears that farmers will go feral and destroy the land as we know it.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think for the last 17 years, farmers in New South Wales have been lobbying about this Native Vegetation Act. We think that it actually creates perverse outcomes. So whilst it's actually set up to create environmental outcomes and biodiversity outcomes, we actually think it does the opposite. And in a lot of cases, it actually injures those outcomes, and it means it's impossible for farmers to do the things that they might do in terms of management practices on their farms that actually do create those good outcomes. So, and it's also extremely punitive. If farmers do something wrong, if they do something that is classified as wrong in the terms of the Act, then they are actually fined excessively in some respects for doing something as simple as removing one single tree.
Yep.
So we find that it's not workable. We don't think it creates the outcomes that it's actually seeking to do. It doesn't operate on the premise that you can have productive outcomes and run a farm in a productive way as well as achieve environmental and biodiversity outcomes. And to us, those terms are not mutually exclusive. We think that farmers are in fact good environmental stewards, and they need to have the flexibility to make management decisions on their properties that will allow their properties to develop, to achieve productive outcomes, to achieve income, so that they can keep ensuring that they achieve those environmental outcomes and those biodiversity outcomes.
So New South Wales farmers, for example, are stewards of 75% of our natural landscape. That's right. It's clear that, to me, that they do a brilliant job. But if I'm the archetypal latte sipping environmentalist in Balmain or Carlton or inner city suburbs, I'm going to be scared, thinking that what I might have seen as progress many years ago has suddenly about to get screwed down and thrown out the door.
And a lot of that's propaganda that has been put out the Greens progressively over the years. Farmers are not environmental vandals. Farmers are environmental stewards. And in a survey that actually New South Wales farmers undertook across the state, but also focusing predominantly on the Western Sydney, Northern Sydney areas, we found that there was a huge amount of sympathy for farmers, a huge amount of awareness of what farmers actually do and what standing farmers actually have in the community. There was a huge understanding out there that farmers are good environmental stewards and that they work with the landscape to create productivity outcomes and in actual fact produce food for people to eat. So I think that we are changing that perception of what farmers do. The other thing is that we now have a large amount of data to back that up. So 17 years ago, we didn't have that sort of data, and we've now been working with institutions such as the University of New England to actually get data about the different sorts of environments. The environment under an invasive native scrub, for example, is generally degraded. The soil has very poor moisture holding characteristics. It's often largely eroded and there's very little ground cover, whereas a selectively thinned invasive native scrub with animals grazing on it actually promotes really good environmental outcomes and biodiversity outcomes, and we have the figures to prove it. So we've taken those figures to government. We've said this Act is not working. This Act is actually creating perverse outcomes. You need to change it. We've got the figures, we've got the science, we've got the polling, we've done legal advice as well. And I guess for us, farmers now are frustrated that even though we've taken a step forward in these latest announcements, we're still a long way from where we thought we'd be when the government came into office.
Does that reflect in a way on your farmers' relationship with government? A Conservative government you would expect coming in would, having made a lot of promises to the farm sector and regional Australia, would have moved quickly to implement changes. Is the farm sector happy with what's occurring?
I think the farm sector is a little confused. We understand that that the coalition in New South Wales inherited a broke state, a state that has no money, no money in the coffers. And we can understand budgetary restrictions. We don't like it, but we understand that. What we don't understand, though, is that a government who, when in opposition over the last 17 years, made numerous statements about what they would do in terms of the Native Vegetation Act and the outcomes that they would seek to put in place to develop rural and regional New South Wales and to allow farmers to make common sense decisions to get those productivity outcomes and the development in rural and regional New South Wales. What farmers can't understand now is, given all those commitments over the past 17 years, innumerable speeches in Parliament, innumerable public speeches about what they will do, why the government hasn't done it. And that is what they don't understand. Yes, we acknowledge we're a step forward, but we are now about to embark on another series of submissions, another review. We had over nearly 800 submissions, I think, to the last review. People are saying, when is enough is enough. We need to move on and actually do something. We need to make sure we have a timeline for the government to actually put something in place.
Fiona Simson, you certainly make your case and you make yourself perfectly clear. No room for misunderstanding. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure.